And I was the nerd that rarely made a B because, well, we both.
I rarely made a B too. It was just on the other side of it.
Mine were usually A's. Yours were not. Okay, we'll go with that, right?
It's like the classes I cared about. Yeah, they were A's and B's, but the ones I didn't, they were D's.
Ah, jeez.
Help me with hip hop. Let's get it right. Protect your patience. Day and night. Donna and David, the experts on your side. Help me with hip hop. Let's get it right.
Today we're going to be talking about big money breaches and bad security grades. Hopefully, neither one of these will apply to you, but I'd be willing to bet maybe one or two will. Oh, man. So we want to talk a little bit about the very recent, as of this week, civil money penalty announcement that came out about Warby Parker. And there's some head scratchers on this one for sure. And then after that, we're going to dive into a very interesting report card for cybersecurity with some Fortune 500 companies in healthcare and what that looks like, and just kind of bounce back and forth on our ideas of what this might mean.
Our own brainstorming.
Yes. But before we do that, you are running out of time to get to the 2025 Prostate Boot Camp. It's going to be May 13th through 16th. And if you are interested in a 4-day, very intensive training course to get your privacy and security program completely set up, you need this information because you probably don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, most people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, I had a conversation earlier this week with a compliance firm. Now, understand, compliance firm, so they're helping other people with HIPAA. There are so many red flags in talking to them about security. They don't have a clue. They don't understand what they're supposed to be doing, what their clients are supposed to be doing. I don't think it's malicious. I just think they don't understand the depth and breadth of what's going on. They weren't even aware the security rule changes were coming.
Yeah.
So
well, a lot of people aren't.
Yeah. I say that as a cautionary tale that there are quite a number of folks out there that are in the business of doing risk assessments, helping in operational coaching and all those types of things that may tell you that they know what's going on. If you don't know what's going on, you have no way of understanding whether or not they're blowing smoke or they're doing you a favor.
Yes.
So at the very least, you should send someone from your organization so you can identify whether you're being scammed or not.
Well, and sometimes it's not like a malicious intent. They truly believe they know.
Right.
But again, there are a lot of people who believe they know things that they don't know. For example, the number of times you'll run into somebody, I understand HIPAA. I worked at a hospital for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Pick a time, 10 years. I had my training over and over and over. I understand HIPAA. That means you understand what the workforce needs to know. That doesn't mean you understand what you need in order to build and manage these privacy and security programs.
Yeah.
And that's what the boot camp is about, is the people who are responsible for making it happen and making sure you get the training that has the little bitty pieces that you need to understand. Mm-hmm. It is not the same, not even remotely.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're in healthcare for 30 years and all you're doing is 30 minutes of annual training, you've only got 15 hours. I mean, that's not even 15 weeks of listening to our podcast.
So there's a lot more to it than most people recognize. And until you really take the time to get the big picture, you're not going to realize just how much you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just a matter of having that understanding. Once you have that, you can do a lot of things with it. You can either start working on your own program, which there are things you're going to have to do either way. Like you can't outsource all of it.
Mm-mm.
You might not even understand that. What can I outsource? How does that look? If somebody comes in and says, we're going to do HIPAA for you, do you even understand how that might even play out? What can you do, not do, that type of thing? You don't know. And so at the end of the day, if you have a data breach or an investigation of some sort, or if audits hit you down the road somewhere, do you think this consulting firm is going to be the one that OCR cares about? No.
No.
They're going to look at you and be like, look, you should have known better. You need to know what you need to know. You can't outsource that accountability.
Yeah, it's ultimately the responsibility of the entity to know what is required and to know whether or not they are doing what is required. You can't suddenly say, well, my accountant told me I didn't need to pay taxes. Or, my mechanic said you don't really have to change the oil. It's still ultimately your responsibility. So, just so we know, just so we're clear, that is what we will teach you at the PriceTech Bootcamp. So go to PriceTechBootcamp.com.
That's right. All right. So enough about that. You have been warned. And we are offering our assistance. We're doing everything we can to help the industry. So we can only bring it to you. You have to drink it yourself. All right, let's dive into the Big Bunny breach. This was from Warby Parker. They had a credential stuffing attack on its website a few years ago.
Yeah, it's and David, what is credential stuffing on a website?
I mean, it's basically where you take credentials, and it could be from usually it's a previous data breach, whether it's one of these big databases of passwords, or you've got passwords that have leaked online and you don't realize it because you didn't change any of your passwords. But anyway, they take it and they go, okay, let's throw a whole bunch of passwords at different usernames. And, we stuff all these passwords in there, and then we see if something will let us in. And oftentimes that happens because you're either using a password that was breached, or you're using a common password that other people use that was also breached. And this is why it's so important to look at that information. I had somebody recently ask me, well, what do we do if our passwords are stolen? Like, how do we stop that? I'm like, you don't stop the passwords from being stolen. If, I can't protect my passwords that somebody else owns because it's in their database. They have to protect that. But what I need to be able to do is I need to be able to understand, oh, this password for my bank account is now breached. I need to change that. And if you're using a single password per login location, then you don't have to go and change everything everywhere. You're just changing that one that became part of the breach.
And that is the big difference of, why can't I use the same password everywhere?
Yeah.
Because once it's out there for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what matters.
Yeah. And these things are easy to look at. I mean, there are definitely different databases online you can go to, and you can run your own email through it or a password through it, and it'll tell you this password is part of a database that's on the dark web, or it's part of a breach. So you can do those types of things yourself.
So that is what they did, and this was so the first thing they noticed. They discover in November 2018, they notice there's unusual activity, and so they discover it on November 26th, don't block it until November 30th, and it started September 25th. So it went on for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a 6-digit number of people, which, granted, that's not huge comparative to other things, right?
Mhm.
But it's at the same time a lot more than what you should have, which is zero. No other way to put it. So they do their notification like they're supposed to. But the thing is, that was 2018. They had additional attacks of the same thing that then they had to report. So we're looking at, they start with like, I don't know, almost 200,000 people, a little shy of that. And then it was like a little here, a little there along the way. They weren't finding a way to prevent these credential stuffing attacks. And they had them again September 2019, January 2020, April 2020, and June 2022, all while they're going through the investigation and discussions with OCR over the initial one.
Wow.
So when they did that initial one, okay. This one I still don't understand. So not a lot of information here, but I got questions and haven't been a customer of Warby Parker and now will not be one because the investigation found 3 long-standing violations. Now, they say, and this one I'm not quite sure about, they addressed 2 of these violations only during the OCR investigation, while 1 remains unaddressed. Like as of today, they have not done a risk analysis.
What?
Yeah. I'm like, wait a minute. I don't get it. But they say that they did apparently try to do risk management without a risk analysis, so it's not going to be very good. And they did start doing information security activity review, but only once they were dealing with the investigation from OCR. So, what the what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's work our way backwards. Or maybe, maybe what it is let's fix as much as we can, then do a security assessment so that it doesn't look bad. I don't know.
I don't understand at all how that goes. So they send them a, propose for a settlement, and they're like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that because you knew that involved a corrective action plan. And so then they send them this $1.5 million civil money penalty, and they're like, yeah, we'll just pay that.
Wow.
Okay. All right. And I do want to point out that in this discussion, in the document, the notice of proposed or determination, whatever, the legal document, that they had an opportunity to prove to OCR that they had implemented, and this said risk security, recognized security practices. That's what it is. Why am I losing my mind? So they did say, prove that you have implemented RecSec, and they then responded, and this was in 2024, like all this has been going on. So they've had plenty of time. It's been 3 years, and they were like, can you prove you've been doing it for 12 months? And they submit some data, some policies and procedures, and basically could not demonstrate that they had substantially implemented RSPs in the prior 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't get any credit for that, but they submitted things trying to say that they had done it. And there's so many things that don't make sense, but there's really no security improvements, really, of any substantial ones during the 4 years that they were getting, the investigation, 2018 to 2022. They were reporting all of these. So I guess they're saying, yeah, we screwed up, and go ahead and hit us with it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what is our quote that we are supposed to learn that we always get, David?
Yeah, so this is coming from the new OCR acting director, and I hope I don't butcher the last name.
Oh, you
But
will.
it's Anthony Archieval, Eval, or Archevil.
We
I
don't
don't
know.
I think it's Archieval, but that's what we'll go with until I hear somebody else say it, so I know for sure. But Anthony, or maybe we'll just call him Double A. I don't know, but
Okay.
he says identifying and addressing potential risks and vulnerabilities to EPHI is necessary for effective cybersecurity and compliance with the HIPAA security rule. Protecting individuals' EPHI means regulated entities need to be vigilant in implementing and complying with the security rule requirements before they experience a breach.
Before,
Yes, before.
not after.
Mm-hmm.
So often we get involved with people after, and then they start doing it. So
Yeah, but it sounds like in this case, they're not even doing it after.
I know, right? So, they did tell us how they calculated it, and it's like $700,000 for 6 years of noncompliance with risk analysis, $500,000 for noncompliance to risk management, and $300,000 for noncompliance with information system activity review.
Wow.
I mean, wow is wow. So there's your 1.5 million, and they said, okay, we'll just stroke a check. Okay.
That's a lot of pairs of glasses.
I know. And I'm sure that they were like, oh, well, insurance will cover that, so we're good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe.
fine. Whatevs. So that's that. And, it's not like some enforcement action coming out of the new administration. It is something that, has a timer on it that started in 2024 and the timer ended. I guess they paid. We don't know. I'm assuming that's why it became an announcement. Anyway, So shifting from not doing it to more people not doing it,
or thinking they're doing it.
I don't know.
I think that's the bigger issue. It's like, when you're not doing it. The harder part is when you think you're doing it.
Yeah.
And you're really not, or you think you're good and you're failing. That's the harder part.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I let's just say not a small organization, and the CFO is, and we're telling them, you've really got a lot of work to do. And I've worked for Fortune 500 and blah, blah, blah. And this is not that. I am sure we're blah, blah. And I'm like, you realize you've got like a significant number of laptops that are not encrypted. I'm sure that's not the case. And, the IT guy's on the call, and I'm like, dude. And he goes, yeah, that is the case. We, acquired these companies and they weren't doing it. And that's not the first, and it won't be the last where, there's that assumption that this is happening. And then we're telling you, no, it's not. So, and, this attitude of, well, you're just trying to make money off of me. I would make my money and walk away happily and not stay here and nag you and tell you this. So, that's healthcare. But this is Cyber News, cybernews.com. And they started this review. It's designed for you to get regular scans and stuff. And it got my attention because, there's the headline. 84% of Fortune 500 companies scored a D or worse for their cybersecurity efforts. A, B, C, D, F. We know what those are. And we hope most people know. Anything below a C is not passing. And, a D is you're just not failing, but you're also not passing. So I never understood the D. The D is to make you feel okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Most of my educational life, I hovered around the CD range. I'm like,
yeah.
that's good enough. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Until I got to things like science and technology, and it was, I was knocking it out of the park. But some of the other ones, I'm like,
Yeah, I could see you being that. And I was the nerd that rarely made a B because, well, we both.
I rarely made a B too. It was just on the other side of it.
Mine were usually A's. Yours were not. Okay, we'll go with that, right?
Yeah, it's like the classes I cared about. Yeah, they were A's and B's, but the ones I didn't, they were D's.
Ah, jeez. Well, the good news is that they gave us, the article covers a lot of interesting stuff. And, first of all, just the thought of 84% of Fortune 500 companies. And again, they'll always tell you, well, we're a Fortune 500 and we do no, it's not that great.
Mm-mm.
And they did break it down by different categories of industries. So then it's like, fine, what about, healthcare and financial folks and those kinds of things? Are they, because of the regulations, are they better? The answer is a firm no. I mean, just no. In fact, in some cases, they're probably worse. But when you look at things like finance and insurance, they got 63% D and 24% F. And that's most of them. So we're talking, a lot of not doing the things that would help. Now, and they did 466 of the Fortune 500, so they got most of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't do it because they couldn't get all the information that they were using. But here's the thing. In healthcare, healthcare is particularly vulnerable, it says. 55% received a D rating and 31% an F.
Wow.
Yes. 10% got an A grade. So overall, the average security score is a 70 out of 100.
Well,
so basically not passing.
Yeah. And it looks like technology and IT is not terribly much better.
Right. So, in the consulting and business services one, the average score is 69, and it didn't even show anybody making an A, B, or C in that one.
Yeah, I know. It's either a D or an F. That's it.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah. But
nobody passed. in consulting and business services, nobody passed.
Yeah. Now, that's why I'm like, well, I need to run hours because we'd be listed there.
Because you would be consulting.
Yeah. And see what happens. But haven't done that yet. We'll update you when we do run ours. But when they were doing these, and not all of these were Fortune 500 that are in this survey, some of them are smaller. Like, you can go and look at who it is, and there were even some healthcare providers in the Atlanta area that I saw on there, and they didn't score well. But the thing, and I'm not sure how they found them, as far as how they decided or if people submitted them, but you can submit your own and they run it and, so on and so forth. So it's really interesting data to know that very few people are doing well when it comes to cybersecurity. So then I was questioning, though, how are they determining these grades? Because I then wondered, because a lot of times we always say that any of these reports and any of these studies, you need to go see how they decided. How did they come up with their numbers? And that's when I found it specifically interesting on the method they used to calculate the scores. And they were able to do this with all external information. So that's good and bad, in that I can find this out looking at a company externally without, any internal knowledge and get these scores. Well, if I'm getting those scores without even seeing what's happening inside the company, I have a lot of questions. So they took and I really like this concept of the algorithm again with the nerdy math thing. And math is in everything. It's everywhere, not just this. But what they did is they would go through and they basically did a very specific risk analysis, collecting data about the target organization from various sources, and then analyzed that data and calculated the score. And they had 7 different factors that were combined and weighted. And so they would look at risk factors like phishing and malware, data breach history. Are they doing patching? Where are the systems hosted? What is the system reputation? Because, you can get blacklisted and that kind of stuff. What kind of email security is there? Because you can look up somebody's email security without ever touching their servers. And then the same thing of what kind of web security do you have on your website? All of those should tell us something, right? So D means, average score of D, average score of 70 meant you got a D, 70 to 79. Anything under 70, you got an F. So the fact that healthcare's average is a 70 screams a lot of concern.
Yeah, you're right there on the line.
Your average is an F, really. So they take the individual factors and then they do all this grouping and the security scores and all of this kind of stuff. So here were the things that they did. They said software patching. If we're seeing things that aren't up to date, then you're probably not patching well. That's a fair statement. And they would rate that. They gave it the highest weight in their scoring. If they found website application security issues, that got, so you got 30% for patching, 15% for the security of your website, 15% for the security of your email, 5 for your system reputation, 5 on your TLS SSL configuration, 5 on how your systems are hosted, and then 25 data breach history. And this is something I don't think people understand. Once you've been breached, you are more likely to be breached again. We just learned that in Warby Parker. 5 times.
Yeah, it puts you on the radar.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that people don't understand. They're like, well, what, how's, they sell the people they got to pay. If you pay, they'll sell that to the other gangs. So they'll make some more money off of selling your information. Here's the IP address. Here's this, and this. That's a lot. And that's why they weight it so heavily. So I thought it was interesting how they weighted it first as far as patching and data breach history. Those are the over 50. That's 55% of the score between those two. What do you think about that approach?
Yeah, that's interesting because the whole data breach history speaks to what did you do before we started looking at stuff. So how well were you protecting things in the past, and then now how well are you doing it currently? So it's interesting. It's an interesting approach, and I do agree that the software patching is a big issue. We've talked about this multiple times. I think it's the hardest part of what IT has to do for a number of reasons. One is because there's not a perfect way to do it. It's not as easy as rolling out this one thing that's going to patch everything, because sometimes whatever the IT department or MSP is using doesn't patch everything, but there's also disparate systems that sometimes aren't being managed, and patching is not something that we would do. Sometimes patching is that you're told not to patch. If you patch this, it'll break. Don't patch it. So there's software patching is just hard to do effectively.
So what they say about how they determined it is they would scan the organization's internet-facing systems and identify the versions of software in use and compare those versions against databases of known vulnerabilities to determine if it's outdated, vulnerable software.
Yeah. And, to reiterate the point, these are public-facing things. So if they can figure this out, so can the bad guys.
Yeah, and I think that's really the way they're looking at it, is to say, this is kind of what the bad guys are probably using, a similar type system, if they are actually doing a hard target.
Yeah. Now, this is where I don't want to get all confusing with this, but when you do pen testing, there's things they call black box testing. Then there's, white box testing. All that basically means is, how much information do you know already? Or are you inside or outside? The problem I see with some people doing pen testing is they do pen testing for internal things, meaning, what does it look like to pen test when you already know maybe the credentials? So you give me the username and passwords for things, and then I try to see how strong a lot of your configurations are and all that. That's very different from what somebody on the outside will see, where they don't know that information. So they're doing like this report here. They're saying, well, what is visible from the outside, and what can I get to? What doors can I knock on, or ports might be open? If I go in and I already, have this information, I'm not necessarily looking at what does it look like from the outside, because I'm looking at it from the inside. What your internal vulnerabilities are different from your external vulnerabilities. So when you start asking about pen testing, or you had a pen test, there's so many different variables to that, and so many questions I have about how it was done, and what kind did you get, and what information was known, unknown, what was in scope, out of scope. It's not just a matter of saying we have a pen test done. That tells me nothing.
Again, you don't know what you don't know. Somebody says, oh yeah, we scan every month. Okay, what are you scanning? And now on the flip side of that is, so often I'll hear people go, well, that's inside, that's internal. I only worry about external. I'm like, you should assume they're in. You can't just assume they're not going to be in. So it goes both directions. So they look at that and see, okay, how old, if I find a vulnerability, how long has that been sitting there? So they take even more into account, just not that there's a vulnerable system that's outdated, but how long is it outdated? Is that patch something that's been there for 6 months, a year? Or is it, 6 days? It's two very different scenarios between a very recent and not so recent. So I was glad to see that they took that into account. Then with the web application security, they used automated scanners to look for vulnerabilities and insecure stuff, same kind of thing. Security headers, making sure the best practices were in place, and rate those. And then the email security, and this is one I don't think a lot of people understand, that you can tell about your email, is in order for you to get email, you have to post your address and the information about how to talk to you out on the internet for all the servers to see. That there's no other way to do it. How will they know how to get to you? Right? Unless you only exchange mail with people who know your address already. But part of that is there are all of these pieces in that configuration that you can do that make your email more secure.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things, and there's SPF, DKIM, and DMARC are things that you configure on your big picture of here's my front door to email me. And those are not required in order to do email. Those are required in order to make your email more secure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that is how you see what's happening within your organization. And just the fact that if you have none of those, that is really not a good sign.
Yeah. That is true. And and a lot of these are starting, if you're using things like Microsoft or Google for your mail, a lot of these are starting to require these things, the SPF, DKIM, and DMARC to be set up, or you'll have delivery issues.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably already may have seen these things pop up, like you don't have these things set up, or if you don't set them up, we're going to have delivery issues. So you should be addressing these already.
At a minimum, SPF and DKIM should have been in place for a while. Now DMARC is becoming much more a bigger requirement, if you will.
Yep.
So they're able to see all of that remotely. Then the reputation, so they check the IP addresses and the domain names against the blacklist and, compromise unexpected ports. Your ports were open, so I let myself in. So there's a lot of ways that they check it. Like if you get blacklisted, often it's because something in your network has been infected and is now being used to attack other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people know that either. The TLS, SSL, those are security settings and certificates that are on the website and services that are done within there. They have different levels of encryption, but they are used to do encryption. So they look at that and where you're hosted. Are you hosted on, Joe Blow's server that's in the basement? Because I know that I years ago found a practice that was literally being hosted on the IT person's, the IT consultant's server in their basement. That's what I said. And then it's easy to look up data breach history and all those kind of things. So they were using these, and then it all gets fed in to the algorithm with the, 0 to 10 score on each of those areas. And they were able then to use all of this, with a really good nerdy calculator to see how it all came out. And what you could see is that, it's a pretty solid number that they were getting to have an external review of the company. I thought it was pretty impressive. So now I'm really looking at these scores and saying, wow, they really are telling you something.
Mm-hmm.
And then the flip side of that is, I wonder how I could use that.
Yeah.
And not just, this external thing, but we already have a lot of algorithms that we put in place. And, ours is, it's been there for years that, we'll give you a score, but we're looking at, here are all these things. And until I get to a category, if you will, that I can answer yes to everything on this list, then I have to keep moving along to get to the right score. And part of it is some of calculations, and part of it is, a bit more subjective and objective. I got a little of both. But I immediately wanted to figure out now, David, could we build our own little thing that could help people score themselves? And I think that's great, but we both know that when you score yourself, you always give yourself a little bonus, don't you?
Yeah. You nudge it just up a little bit. Yeah. That third party, somebody who doesn't have a dog in the fight, taking a look at it. Yeah. But to answer your question, yeah. Can we build it? Sure. Do we have time to do it? I don't know. It's one of those things where I'd love to do things like this, but it takes resources, whether it's time, money, or both.
Yeah. I may use one of the AI tools and see what I can come up with and have, you can have those conversations with it, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. It is making things like this easier and faster to build. So I'm looking forward to that part of AI, not to change the discussion to that, but I am looking forward to be able to building things faster and less expensive than it was in the past.
Yeah. I mean, we're already doing that in a lot of ways. And it is very nice to use the tools in that manner. And so we'll report back if we come up with something, maybe even share it at the boot camp. Who knows what we'll do as we're moving along.
But if we build something, we'll probably put it in the Garden Club or HIPAA for MSPs. We'll probably stick it in there for use.
Yeah, of course we will. They get all of our cool stuff.
Yeah, they do.
Things that we don't risk putting out, we don't put everything out for free. We do like to, make a living. We have to do that. And, but keep in mind that even if you're doing these assessments and you think you're good, this goes back to where we started. If you think you're doing good, what makes you think that you are better than 86% of everybody else in healthcare?
Ooh, that's a good question.
How is it that if 86% of everybody else in healthcare is getting a D or an F, how is it that you are not? Because you have to know a lot to be getting an A.
Yeah.
So either you're a wizard or you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know, honestly, I don't know how it would see our numbers looking at us externally. I think we'd come out okay. I think we'd be passing.
Yeah.
But I think we'll make an A? I don't know.
But the difference is you and I look at that and go, I think we're good. However, I'm sure there's room for improvement. I'd like to know where that is.
Exactly.
Whereas other people are, I think we're good, and I don't need you to tell me where we're not.
Yeah.
In fact, if you tell me we're not, I'm suspicious of you, not suspicious of my stance. And that's the difference. Like, I'm always suspicious. Like, I want to prove it.
Yeah.
Even if my own team's like, oh, yeah, we've got that security rolled out. Okay, well, confirm that for me. And come back to me and tell me that we double checked that. Like, I don't take anything at face value, even internally.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's why you and I do things like secretly fish our own people outside of the phishing campaigns they know about happening, or the social engineering attack that we had done on them, or, because we do want to know. And the only way to be sure is to constantly probe and test and confirm.
Yeah.
And it's fun sometimes. Not always. Not always.
Yeah, it's mostly nerve-wracking.
So, yeah, it is. Even if you're getting a good score, it becomes nerve-wracking to go through it. So
yeah, you're right.
But I thought it was pretty interesting. There we go. Let's go forward, David.
Yep, let's do it. There we go. All right, folks, that is our show for today. Be sure to join us again next week. And remember, for Donna and myself, the HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.